Okay, here we are again. Welcome back, everybody. This is the We Quit Booze Brothers, which is a podcast where we try to have honest, no fluff conversations about our various experiences of quitting alcohol. And with me, as always, is my brother Matt. Hello, Matt.
Hey guys, hi everyone. We are indeed back and we are going truly international today. We have Mark who is in Florida and I'm here in good old Paris. So there you go. The magic of the internet, it knows no bounds. So it's great to be back. We're ready with another topic and hopefully, despite the distance apart, we can entertain you and bring you some of our thoughts and wisdom for today's topic.
Yeah, I'm not sure if wisdom is quite the right word, but we'll
Yeah, I
bring
said
you
it.
our thoughts. That's for sure. Yeah. So yeah, I'm here in sunny Florida. We lived in Florida for quite a period of time through circumstance, and we sort of like to come back and visit and just see friends. So there you go. So here we are, and yeah, so it's nice and sunny and very, very Floridian. But anyway, you haven't dialed in to listen to me gas off about Florida. So right, so to get right to it, the we various conversations, and like I always say, sometimes these things overlap. But the conversation that we just wanted to have today was to talk a little bit about one of the things Matt and I often say about having quit alcohol is how the world just sort of seems to open up somewhat now that we don't drink. And I thought what would be sort of useful is if I just sort of share my kind of typical what would be a typical working week for me when I was drinking. So just sort of give you, run you through this, and I'm sure this will resonate. So for me, it would normally start on a Friday. So you get to the end of the week, and I would rush home, and I would start drinking because it was the weekend, and that the weekend, that's what you do. You're not working. There's no work,
Yeah.
so we'll have a drink. That's what we do at the weekend. So what I'd normally do is I'd start with a beer or two, possibly three, and have a few beers sort of early evening. Then typically we would have some dinner, and I would open up a bottle of white wine, probably. So what I would very often do is have sort of white wine pre-dinner, or sort of early on in the dinner, and sometimes move on to red wine later on in the dinner. So or just depending on what we were eating. But either way, drink wine was the sort of was what that was all about. And then to sort of finish off, I would quite often then have a few glasses of whiskey. And by a few, I mean, it could be, two or three, it could be half a bottle. It's been known to be, pretty much almost an entire bottle sometimes. And I just get stuck in. And I don't know if this resonates with anybody, but when I used to drink, all of the common sense, all of the rationality, all of the pragmatism just went out the window. That was future me's problem. I was having a lovely time. I enjoyed it. I always felt that it was my time to unwind. And who the fuck was going to tell me not to do it? So that was a Friday. So I'd wake up on a Saturday feeling pretty shit, as you can probably imagine. And I would normally do basically a very similar thing on a Saturday night. On a Sunday, I would do this thing where I would offer to prepare Sunday lunch. So I would cook the lunch. And what that meant is that I could open wine while I was cooking. So quite often I'd put music on in the background, I'd open a bottle of wine, thinking I was having a lovely time, drink a few bottles of wine, possibly even have a couple of whiskeys afterwards, and just enjoy a Sunday. And then I'd wake up on a Monday feeling awful, actually. Depending on how bad it had been, depending on how much I drank that weekend, I'd get that sort of heart thumping, sort of trickling of sweat that I was kind of little, you feel very sort of muggy and around your temples.
Clammy, like.
Clammy, that's the word. Yeah, not muggy. Yeah, that's the weather is. Yeah, sort of clammy, and just really feeling pretty terrified about the week and thinking, oh God, I wish I didn't have to do this. Monday, I normally didn't drink. I'd normally take Monday off, and Tuesday, I didn't drink. What was interesting about Tuesdays for me is that I always remember saying to my wife, God, I slept well last night. I always slept really well on a Tuesday because I think I'd had the Monday recovering from the hangover, Tuesday, probably my system was sort of started to repair. And by Tuesday night, of course, it was fairly sort of clear of, I don't know if it was clear of toxins, but most of them had probably gone by then. And I slept really well, and it was always something I noticed. Then, of course, it was Wednesday. So Wednesday's the middle of the week. I call it Hump Day. That was my excuse to have a couple of drinks. I didn't drink loads on a Wednesday, but I would drink wine with dinner. Sometimes I'd have a whiskey or a bourbon. That was, unfortunately, that was, it was my Achilles heel with alcohol. I really love whiskey and bourbon, or sort of convinced myself that I loved it at the time. And that was it. I'd be drinking on a Wednesday. Then Thursday, I'd have a few drinks as well. Rinse and repeat. I get to Friday. Now, what's interesting about this is, as I say all this, it's pretty embarrassing to admit it. It's generally fairly horrifying when I think about how much I drank. But at the time, if you'd have asked me, I'd have normalized it. I said, well, there's nothing wrong with it. So Friday
Yeah.
night, I'd have a few pre-dinner drinks. We'd have wine with dinner, and I'd have an aperitif afterwards. I was able to completely normalize what was tons and tons of alcohol. Now, the problem with that was that in my life, I was either, and I've written this down, I was either recovering from a hangover, um, I was either drinking alcohol, in which case I was kind of, you know, basically drunk. Um, I was either experiencing, shame, regret, low self-esteem. So trying to fit all of that into a normal week takes up a lot of time, takes up a lot of energy, creates hurdles, obstacles, just makes living life really, really fucking difficult because you're tired all the time. You've got anxiety. I felt ashamed of it, really. I didn't, I did so just, there was something in me that it was always the lingering in the background. How could I go into a meeting at work on a Monday or a Tuesday, knowing that I'd been sort of up till 3 in the morning drinking and just not living in a way that I felt was representative of the person that I wanted to be. Since I've stopped, all of that has gone. And just think of all the time, not just the time that I get back. The world has just opened up, and we've used this term before of not drinking is like a superpower. And it really is for me because my mental clarity has come back, my energy has returned, and now there are projects that I'm able to do and I'm able to see them through and nothing gets in the way. And look, that was longer than I expected, and my intros always are. But that's the message that I wanted to deliver today was just that, yeah, when you add it all up, when you actually analyze what the impact of the time, the impact on your physical health, the impact on your mental health, when you remove all of that, it's like having a clear runway in front of you, and almost anything is then possible in terms of what you want to do with your life. So I'll end it there and I'll hand over to you. That was
Yeah, no. Do you know what's funny is I think I could have carried on with your conversation there, like filling in for things that I think you missed. So if I look at like how life opens up when you quit, I'm not going to go through my routine before. I think I've been through it enough. I pretty much drank whenever I could in the evenings. I like you, I tended to have 2 days off a week. But Wednesday, big drinking night, and sometimes Thursday, you're nearly at the weekend. I remember sometimes feeling like rough still on Thursday and just going, oh, sod it, it's Friday tomorrow, let's drink, and then rinse and repeat. You're back into that hellhole, and plus I had drugs on top of it as well, which certainly didn't help. And I think that's probably something we should go into another time. But if I look at you, like how life opens up, I mean, it's just changed completely for you. Your love of sport has manifested into a coaching role, which you started to particularly when you're in Florida, became really quite sort of serious and important. And I remember you doing work with Miami and things like that, and that just, I don't think would have happened, or it's certainly going to be really hard for you. You got into shape. I mean, God, the difference. This is a funny one, actually. We should probably try and work out how we can put photos. But Mark sent me a photo of one time when I visited him in Florida. I looked like I'd eaten my fucking children. I was massive, like literally. It was like, oh my God. I showed it to my wife. She was like, that's photoshopped. I'm like, honestly, it's not. That is me. So, the weight loss, the whole, just getting your life back into control, I think, is just incredible. But I think, how does it open up when you quit? Like, I'm going to talk about something that's just happened to me right now. And this isn't in any way meant to be pretentious, because I'm not that sort of person. I'm just going to tell you how it is. So yesterday afternoon, I got an invite from the CIO of the company I work for. I work for a big beauty company. It's great. But I got this email inviting me to a meeting tonight. And first reaction, shat myself, like, Christ, what does he want? But then, read through the notes about what it was about, and I was like, yep, okay, that's fine. Can see why I've been invited to this. And he doesn't get any senior, really. The next step up is the CIO of the company. CEO, sorry. So look, I was really super nervous. But the thing is that I know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know. I know that sounds silly, but like, I knew that joining the call, it would be fine. I'm there to represent my topics, my subject, my area of the business that I work in. And I started to think of the plus sides. I know him from before, not well, but now he really knows who I am. And even at the beginning of the call, he was like, "Hey, Matthew, you all right if we do this in French?" Because he wasn't sure if my French was great. I was like, "Yeah, no problem. I can certainly follow. It's no worries." So what I'm trying to say is, how does life open up to you? Before, when I was drinking, I would have been a mess. I would have done everything I could to get out of that call. I would have asked my boss to join me. I would have made sure that I had someone else there. I would have, I wouldn't have wanted, I might not have put my camera on. I would have done everything to make myself totally invisible. But this time I didn't, because I'm comfortable with it. And I'm not at those levels. And he's really good at what he does, and he puts pressure and etc. But I just, like I say, it was not really a problem. Whereas beforehand, it would have just been horrendous. And those are the little things that change. You get your confidence. You look at things in a different way, and that was just great. And the other thing I was thinking about was, it allows you to understand what life actually is. Like, you're in your own head all the time. That's kind of a good and a bad thing, maybe, but there is no escapism through alcohol anymore. So you find other ways, and those other ways are things that you didn't see before. So it kind of allows you to see. I always say that giving up drinking, it allows you to look up. It allows you to see those things you always missed. Like, if you're walking through Rome or Venice, or I don't know, wherever, Paris, I always say to people, look up, because that's where you see the things that you miss, that architecture, those trees, those, bridges, whatever it might be. And that, to me, is what stopping alcohol does for you. It allows you to go on walks, visit places. It allows you to start, running. You appreciate a nice meal. And look, it's not all, teddy bears and flowers, but you really, it just opens up in a different way, in ways you never knew that it could. And I think that's super important. So I think you start to really understand yourself. You understand your barriers. You understand who you are. I'm a massive introvert. There are things that scare me. The call earlier scared me, but I I can control that now, and I can fall back on what I know and who I am.
No, absolutely. We're totally on the same page. And when you quit drinking, I mean, I sort of gave you a run through of my typical week. Suddenly, you have to do other things to fill the time that you would have previously been drinking
Yeah,
or
takes a
recovering.
lot of time, boozing.
It takes, I mean, I think I did the calculation once, and I think I calculated that I got back about 45 hours a week. And I'm not making
Doesn't
that up.
surprise
I'm
me.
not an exaggeration. It's another working week. And there's so much that you can do with that. Now, it takes a little bit of time, but there's a great phrase. I think it's James Clear who wrote the book Atomic Habits. He says that the the trajectory of your life tends to bend in the direction of your habits. And if all you're doing is drinking and feeling terrible and, recovering from hangovers, your life tends to bend in that direction. Your example of your meeting with the CIO, I'm not sure you'd even be in a position where the CIO would have been inviting you to a meeting because you wouldn't have been
That's the
promoted.
bit I missed. You're
Yeah,
absolutely right. And I can 100% say with conviction that there's no way I would have been in that meeting.
because you
He wouldn't even
hide.
know who I was.
You hide when you're drunk. Sorry, when I was drinking, I did everything I could to hide. So, you know, the one great decision for me to quit drinking alcohol led eventually to a load of other amazing decisions in terms of self-analysis, self-discovery. I'm kinder to myself. I'm sort of comfortable now with the person that I am, and I have a lot of projects on the go, and I feel excited by them, and don't feel overwhelmed by them, and that's what quitting alcohol has given me. So I better leave it there because I always go on and on and on. So I'm going to try and sort of restrict it. But of course, it's always endlessly fascinating, and there's so much more to be said. But I'll leave it there. Really, that was just my point. Is that the world just opens up. You narrow when you drink. It's like I almost have this visual of a kind of letterbox that the world seems to get compressed to the size of this tiny narrow space that you have to work in and operate in because of so much of your time is filled with drinking and regret and all the shit that goes with it. And as soon as you take that away, it's just like, you're in surround sound, full IMAX, Technicolor, it just everything opens up and there's really nothing to prevent you from living the life that you want to live, and that's kind of really at the end of it, I think that's what it's all about. Before I forget, there's just one thing I wanted to mention that one of our listeners mentioned a movie they'd watched called Outrun, and it's about alcoholism essentially. I watched it on the plane on the way over to Florida, and I thoroughly recommend it. It's a really really good movie. It's about a girl who moves to London. She thinks she grew up in the Orkney Islands, which is a tiny cluster of islands on the north coast of Scotland, and ends up ends up with a alcohol problem. And it's a gritty kind of. They don't pull any punches, but I don't know if anybody's been on this journey. It's worth a watch, and good reminder of why we do what we do.
That's a great way to end. And I just want to end as well on a super positive note. So I'm not going to say his name, but an old friend of mine got in touch, and he, I believe, listens to us. So thank you, first of all. And he said that he's stopped drinking, and I think it's been a while now. Maybe a year or so, but you know that that's why we do this. We don't get that many views. We don't have thousands, millions of subscribers. It's not why we do it. We don't, that's kind of by the by. It's great. Anyone who listens to us, we thank you so much. But, if just one person, if it benefits, that's why we do it. So, thank you. You know who you are.
Yeah,
And yeah, let's end it there. I think that's a good
absolutely.
place.
Yeah, no, 100%. So fantastic. Well, look, thanks very much for that, Matt. Thanks always. Thanks everybody for listening. Really, really appreciate it. As I always
Give us
say,
a
never
thumbs
quit
up.
quitting. Yeah, all the things. Yeah, never quit quitting. It's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him. Till the next time. Cheers. Bye for now.
Bye bye.